This is In the Zone with Ian Robb and Dancin Rodda. One's a mental toughness coach who also helps riders with recovery. The other, a horseman with soul, who is also a marriage counselor for the rider and horses. Together, they dive beyond ribbons and rankings to where real riders train, the mind. From elite arenas to quiet barns, this show is about the mental edge, the recovery rhythm, and the heart that keeps you in sync with your horse and yourself. So whether you're tuning in from the tack room or the open road, saddle up. You're in the zone now.
We are thrilled to be joined by Brianna Hammerman, a licensed professional counselor, equestrian, and founder of Be Heard Counseling. Brianna has dedicated her career to creating a safe space where riders and individuals can truly feel seen, supported, and unbridled in their growth. She's also the co-host of the Unbridled Therapist podcast, where she brings powerful conversations about mental health, stigma, and the healing lessons horses teach us. We can't wait to dive into her journey, explore how she helps riders manage performance pressure, and learn what it really means to be heard. So Pete, are you ready to get started with In the Zone?
I'm ready.
All right, Brianna, hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me. That was such a wonderful intro. I'm happy to be here.
I know. Just wait till we finish what I have to say. You know, who knows where this is going to go. So
before we get started, let's get a little bit of background. Tell us your background and how you got into doing what you do.
So I didn't really know where it would take me, but horses have always been my compass. Originally, I was competitive equestrian. Earlier in my years, I would say then as in the competitive world, you know, you turn 18, you're considered an amateur. So I did more showing that way and still didn't really know what I was going to, do with my life, but knew I wanted horses to be a part of it and wanted to keep it as my hobby. And years later found counseling and went through that program. And really was like, I'm just going to work with an individual, too many players in it, do family or systems work. And what I found myself asking all the time was, I bet there's another side to this, or I wonder how this looks in relationship. And looking back on it, I think it's the way I always felt about horses too. And I rode a lot of different horses in my riding career, but I was definitely relational and like to have a bond with them and like to know what they're about and want them to know what I'm about. And then I found out about equine assisted psychotherapy and realized that horses were helping people heal and show them a way to do life differently in a, which sounds interesting, kind of non-threatening, non-intimidating way. Most people would be surprised by that because of their size and they don't know anything about them. And so it just ended up being this beautiful windy road and a blend of my passions of wanting to help people be in relationship with horses, but not in a way that I needed to change my hobby of riding. And I really like what I say about the psychotherapy with horses is I don't want to be a horse trainer. I don't want them to teach them to be like me. I want them to learn about themselves. And so I think the horses do a beautiful job of that. And they just have to show up and be themselves.
So let's be clear for our listeners. You are
Yes.
licensed to give psychological advice, where some people like myself give advice, but I'm not licensed. So we have a licensed person doing it correctly. So this is great to have it so that way our listeners know that you've gone through the schooling to be able to do that. So that's great. So tell us, what does be heard mean?
That's a great question. I want people to feel like there is a space that they can be heard. It's one of the most important experiences we have. We want to feel safe, secure, seen, supported in this world. And horses have connected me to so many amazing people like this podcast. We wouldn't be here without some other horse connection. And, being a licensed counselor, I hear a lot one-on-one, and I was hearing these themes that are happening in the equestrian world and want to change the narrative of how we're doing it and what's happening. And so that's how Be Heard was born, really.
Pete, I like the play on words right there because obviously Be Heard, you want the person to be heard by Brianna, but also the herd with the horses.
That's right.
So I think that was quite clever. I mean, I couldn't come up with that. And so if you were just to have a mission about that, what would be that mission?
Oof, it's a big one. I Currently, I think the mission might change over time. It's been in a couple iterations already. But as I'm working with performance coaching equestrians, elite athletes working at all, in all different facets of the sport, professionals, amateurs, I think there's a piece that's being missed about the rider experience and the mental health and the performance side and understanding the neurobiology of anxiety and trauma. And so I have this image of, as there's a crew of people. I'm steeped in the hunter jumper world. I work with folks more, it could be in the eventing world or dressage, primarily English. Doesn't mean I won't or can't work with Western. It just hasn't really been the niche that's coming. But I have this image of how there's a team that like leaves the schooling ring and they walk up to the ring and, there's the coach and maybe there's an assistant trainer and there's the horse and maybe there's a person on the ground, maybe they're groom, maybe they're not, maybe it's the rider's partner. And there's all these people paying attention to the horse and hopefully teaching the riding skills too, but no one's there coaching the mental part of it. And I just think there's a really, really huge hole there. So I feel really passionate about supporting that part of the sport.
So talking about that, I just came up with a question. What do you think of trainers that yell and scream at their students?
Fabulous question. As a horse trainer, you also might have some ideas that there maybe were some methods before that we thought worked, or some people are still exercising and maybe they work short term, maybe they don't work at all and they don't know how to do it differently. So I try and think people came by that method honestly. I'm going to choose to believe that it's coming from a good place. They are wanting to help and wanting someone to do better, but they're missing the signs that it might not be working for their people. What we know about the neurobiology of the brain and the anatomy of the brain is learning happens when we feel safe and social. Typically, when we're being yelled at, we're under threat. And if your brain is under any kind of threat, it might be absorbing some, but it's probably going into survival mode. And so I like helping trainers. So if there's a trainer listening, sometimes it can just be a shift in language or a shift in tone or understanding what's happening for them. If they're getting frustrated that they've said the same thing 5 times, right, they might start yelling. If that's happening, recognize in your student that they're probably not hearing the information. You're both frustrated. So it's not actually working for either of you, and probably not for the horse either.
It's kind of like white noise for them. So I played many sports, football, basketball, tennis. In football and basketball, did I have some coaches yell at me? Yes, I did. Did I have them scream and yell and probably do a few other things there too? Did it fire me up? Sure. Because that was that type of sport where you could use that adrenaline. You could use that anger or that hustle, whatever, or my body, because I was much bigger as a kid than most other kids. But then when I played tennis, how could I lose to someone half my size where I could just bop them on top of the head? So when I taught tennis, and I taught a lot of professional players and college players, it's the energy you want to give across. And I think that will really come to play more. And I talked to Dancin Pete here. Energy is a big part of his training, but also too, because you got to be calm, cool, and collected. I mean, I had to be relaxed out there. I had to be in the parasympathetic, but very focused. We talk about being in the zone, hence the name of our podcast here. And being angry or being that's a feeling, that's an emotion, but not the targeted emotion that we want to have about being focused or in the zone. So I think that's great that you see it too in that equestrian world, because it is kind of missing. I saw it in the tennis world because it was under the microscope all the time to kind of being doing that. But I'm just curious, as a licensed professional counselor and amateur rider, how are these two worlds intersecting for you as a rider?
They are intersecting often. It is, I kind of liken it to practicing if I were practicing in a small town. I'm not in a small town, but the horse community is small. So there are some dual relationships, which we do talk about. Sometimes I see my clients at shows. We always talk about how we're going to navigate that. And I think it's really helped me. There's a lot of, when I'm telling my clients, I'm also telling myself and I'm reminding myself of that. And then I'm also thinking about how I want to show up and how I want to show up for myself and how I want to show up for my clients. I still want to have some space where it gets to be my experience and I make mistakes, but I am generous in my thinking with myself when I make a mistake. I can be disappointed about a round that didn't go the way I wanted it to, or, if a score doesn't feel like it matched the ride I had. I'm human. I still have those experiences and I get to use it. I think it makes it helpful in my work with people. I don't over relate or try and assume their experience, but most of my equestrian clients, and I'm calling it equestrian counseling. I don't know if that's a clinical term or not, but there are people that want to come that don't necessarily want to work on their performance so much, but they want to talk with someone who understands being an equestrian and that horses aren't their pet. And, they don't have to spend 30 minutes explaining the dynamics of some nuance of it. So I think the intersection has been really very beneficial personally and professionally.
No, I agree. I think that's great because as Pete and I say quite a bit, you always want to work with a trainer or even a therapist that has gone through what you have gone through or is going through. So if they're constantly learning and constantly doing things, that's the people you want to work with, not the perfect athlete, like let's just say John McEnroe, he was very gifted, or Magic John, very gifted, but didn't really have to figure out how to really figure it out when you're on the bench all the time trying to hustle to make it the team or to do well. So that makes a world of difference.
Well, and one of the things I run across, and I'd love your input on it, is students that think they're the only ones struggling and going through, I'm not good enough, I'm not, able to do this. And then when I've said, I'm going through the same thing right now, and they're like, no, you're not, you're amazing, you can do all these things. But what's the psychology behind getting them to realize that we all are going through it no matter what level we're at?
I think we don't want to feel alone in our experience. It's about having someone to crawl in the hole with you and not maybe fix it or try and put a Band-Aid on it, just to feel, that someone's in there with you. Whether you've been there or not, one of my teachers in grad school told this great story about this couple she'd seen before she was married, and they were coming obviously for couples counseling. And they had said to her, like, well, how can you even relate to us? Like, you're not even married, And she was like, well, I'm trained and all these things, right? And they were kind of like, yeah. They did their piece of work, they had graduated or whatever, they took a break a couple years later, but it must have been many years later, but they restarted counseling, maybe for a different issue. And by that time, my professor had gotten married and, was in a relationship. And then they said, well, how can you relate to us? Like, you're in the new, honeymoon phase. So it was sort of like, you don't need to be, what I take from that is you don't need to have walked the same exact path. You need to have an understanding of relationships and what it's like to be a human in it. And I think we're really all seeking that. And I think the horses are seeking that too in the partnership, right? They want to be understood in their reaction and their experience too. And I think when the riders and horses have that, the performance reflects it. Doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means you see it. You can see a rider and horse that know each other.
Absolutely. I say on your podcast, which I've been listening to, by the way,
Thank
and I'm
you.
kind of impressed. There's a few things I'm going to bring up here later on because I can relate to it when I taught tennis very much about our relationship, with the riders all together and what that's all about. But we'll go there in a second. But on your podcast, Unbridled Therapist, you talk about shedding the fix-it mentality. Why is therapy not about fixing people?
That's a great question. Out of context, I'm not sure what the context was for that piece, but I think the fix it implies that the underlying belief to fixing culture is that's you're inherently broken or something is wrong with you. Like, you don't need fixing. You might need support. You might have skills that got buried with junk along the way, or you forgot about them and they need to be dusted off, or we need to go excavate and find them, right? Like, I have those. I have the training for the tools, but I don't believe that there's anything that you are so broken, so wrong, so damaged that you need fixing. And I'm certainly not the fixer, right? I hope I can walk with you on it and I can guide. And I like that line between coaching too, is that sometimes people don't have the answers and they are coming to you. It can lead to a really helpless feeling if someone's like, I'll do the quintessential therapist reflective of like, if they're like, I don't know what to do. And a therapist says like, well, what do you think you should do? It's not a bad question, right? But they're really like, what they're really saying is like, I don't have the answers. Like, I need some guidance here. And so I like that I can flip into the coaching to offer some skills, I would call it, maybe more than fixing, so that they can try some things out and then make it theirs and add it to their toolbox.
Perfect. That's what I wanted you to share. That's exactly what it was.
So how do you help students to process trauma and anxiety?
And when you're talking about students, like clients or performance coaching, or
Sure.
Yeah. Well, first we talk about what if there was an event, if it was ongoing, and recognizing what's happening in their body, what they're feeling, what they're sensing, and what the thoughts are with it. And we start to untangle it. I think about it as a kind of trauma takes like a nicely ball of yarn and it just like knots it all up, right? Like it just turns it into this mess that can make it really hard to untangle and see what's what. And so we start by trying to organize some of that, find their way back to themselves, honestly. So there are some techniques, EMDR, you might be familiar with, which has been used, and there's lots of research about how it's helped with PTSD, and it really helps the brain and body reintegrate an experience that maybe they couldn't, which is what trauma does. It sort of stops it from integrating. I don't know if I'm using examples that make sense.
No, absolutely. That's very interesting. I think I got to learn a little bit more about the MDR for sure.
Yeah.
But
EMDR is used for, actually has been used a lot for like performance enhancing. They call it like resourcing. So before games, like some baseball players will use it to feel really strong in their skills and their confidence for themselves. So it's not all about trauma. There is kind of the other side. We beef up the other side too, the strength building, where it's not all about, right, the trauma.
so what role does vulnerability play in healing, Brianna? Or sorry, I say Dr. Hammerman.
No,
Or
not a
rider
doctor.
in
Oh,
the
yeah. Yeah. That would be a different degree, but
Okay.
vulnerability.
For riders or for humans in general,
Yeah.
because a lot of people really are afraid to be vulnerable. You
Yeah.
know, they got to really make any progress in themselves, they have to be vulnerable. So maybe you could add a little bit more to that. What kind of role does that play in the healing process?
I think it's one of the cornerstones of the healing process to be vulnerable, to say what you're really feeling or thinking without fear of judgment, so we can look at it. That's when the change can happen. You know, it's like if there were a horse who has an injury and it's slight, right? It's maybe not so obvious. They're going to compensate in some other ways with their body. And so you might be addressing the symptoms or some of the topical stuff that needs to happen first, maybe the more obvious ones. But when you really get to the underlying root, I think the healing really happens from the inside out. But we have to create situations and conversations and spaces that make it safe enough for people to be vulnerable. Like if a horse is being chased by a lion, right? If they're wild horses, we know this, their bodies are going to manipulate it so that they look like they're running sound because they don't want to look vulnerable. If they're vulnerable, they are more likely to be eaten. That's the same, right? In human to human relationships, we just seem to think it's different because we're not being chased by a lion or a bear or something survivalist.
So you treat eating disorders. How common does this happen in the equestrian world, and how do you combat that?
Great question. My training during grad school and then after was working with adults with eating disorders and their family members to create sustainable recovery-focused environments so that again, systemically healing could happen post-treatment and back in, with their loved ones. And it is very prominent in the equestrian world. It is harder for folks to talk about and not talked about as much. I think there was some research that showed college athletes equestrian athletes on a self-report scored like 86% of them rated for some level of an eating disorder or disordered eating. And comparatively, like less than 20% of them sought treatment. So it's a big issue. And the question is, why isn't it more public? Why isn't it getting treated? Look, what's the barrier to treatment for it? And I don't really have a great answer. I think there were some messages about a rider's body and how it should look and how it should feel. I think the message currently is shifting a little bit. Like anybody is a good body. It's more about being effective than what it looks like. I love all those messages. And then I think the grind, like you have to grind so much, 12-hour days and your horse gets all these treatments, but the rider's living off coffee and Advil and, hasn't had a good meal. Like you would never send your horse into competition on an empty stomach. You wouldn't probably do that. Hopefully, I'm hoping no horse people do that. And so I think if we can treat ourselves the way we treat our horses, if the humans will treat themselves and offer the same care and concern, I hope we'll start to hear more about it and people will get healthier.
So I struggle with my riders that show on going for a ribbon. I actually want to go out and buy like a whole bunch of different beautiful ribbons and just hand it to them at a lesson and go, here, you got your ribbon. Now what?
Yeah.
So what is your way of helping us shift that thought pattern from ribbons to, hey, what's the quality of our relationship with my horse?
I would start by asking them what the ribbon means to them. Like what does it mean if you get the blue, or you place in this big class, and is your self-worth tied to it? And if it is, how do we, again, untangle that? I like to think about, like, how do you feel about your ride? How would you rank your ride? Start internal and see if they can start to have some language around it instead of being outcome driven, right? It's only a good ride if the judge thinks so. And that,
And they didn't see the struggle before you showed it.
right. And it's all relative. The ribbons are so fascinating to me because it's all relative to what the rest of the class did, And so I like people. So someone will tell me, like, I'll say, how was your competition? If I know they had one, they'll say, well, I won, or I was champion. I'm like, well, great. That wasn't the question. Like, did you like your rides? What do you feel like you did well? What do you want to work on? And they're kind of like, oh yeah, no one really asked me that. It sort of stops sometimes with the ribbon. And so if we can continue the conversation and ask people to think a little more critically and a little more internally, I think we'll shift away from those ribbons. I love that idea of having ribbons in lessons. Maybe have some printed out of, like, I'm doing this for some of our year-end finals, of like, survived the warm-up ring, made it over all the jumps, stayed on the horse, biggest supporter of peers. Because I think all those things go into our community being healthy.
Well, we did a mentor and I did a leadership clinic in Canada, and we ended up getting some really nice ribbons that had the title of our clinic on it. Mm-hmm. And we handed it out at the end, and I had grown men crying, and everybody that was there were in tears. One lady goes, it's the first time I get to come back from a clinic and put up my ribbon. Oh. So there was a lot of psychology and upset and good tears that they were seeing their friends bring back ribbons, and they weren't when they went to their clinics because they didn't show.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think showing is the end all be all. I like to think of showing as, like, I literally get to show off what I'm working on. We get to show our partnership off, and hopefully it's fun.
It is interesting because in tennis, when I coach, we talked a lot about goals and our goals for the matches and what goes on. And yeah, we don't want, sure, everyone wants to win the tournament, but that's an outcome. We got to talk about the process and kind of get there. And did you see the improvement and see what's going on? How'd you handle that turn, let's just say, or that particular jump? And, too, is being able to be in that calm, cool, focused energy that you have, because the horse is going to feel that. And do you guys more one than say opposite? Because if you're just thinking, I got to get that ribbon, and you, let's just say a pole drops or something of that nature, then you tighten up, and then the horse will tighten up. So, you got to think about those things there too. But, something I kind of think about though too, and I'm curious on your part, since we're talking about the setbacks, like falls or bad rounds, like we were just talking about, can rattle the confidence in the riders. What's your go-to advice for bouncing back?
Great question. I think it's unique to each person. So one of the things I talk about with riders a lot is how to prep yourself like you prep your horse, and know yourself as well as your routine and your program for your horse. So I would start with, like, what do you know about yourself and mistakes? In the saddle, out of the saddle, are you hard on yourself at work? How do you overcome them there? If they're like, I'm able to do it by this, great. We try and take stuff out of the saddle, help them in the saddle. If they're like, oh, I'm tough on myself across the board, I don't recover from mistakes anywhere. Then we start working on, I guess, the thing that is getting in their way of being really present, which can be different things. It could be, for a fall, it might be a physical part, like in their body, if they're feeling it, or if they're they got injured, really allowing your body time to heal for that too, because that creates some anxiety in the brain. If it's a rail or, a round that you weren't pleased with, you wished it went better, I really try and help folks think about how their horse would think about it. Like, they're long past it. They need you to be a partner every step of the way. And that's more important to them than thinking about the rail. Like, they're not thinking about that anymore. They need you to keep the communication going. So I might say, close that chapter on that round or that rail, that jump, that turn, whatever it was, that pattern, and see what's happening now and feel what's happening underneath you.
So what does in the zone mean to you?
To me, I think there is an optimal zone for performance. And it's interesting as you're talking about being cool, calm, and, collected because the horse feels it. I think that's true. I think when we are performing, we do want a little bit of activation. It's what keeps us sharp. It's what keeps us dialed in a little bit more, so that we can do some of those hard things. We need that push of adrenaline to be helpful. We don't want it out of control, right? Or overwhelming so that we can't make decisions, right? Or if like rage was taking over on the tennis court, and like you were talking about, right? That's not good. But if you want to use it to be able to, have your swing be more effective or more powerful, like there are ways to harness it. So being in the zone, I really think is for riders about when anyone really, how do you know when you're in that place of being able to think and feel simultaneously and access all your tools?
No, absolutely. I think that's great. And as you know, many riders face performance anxiety before stepping in the arena. So, Brianna, what strategies do you recommend in those high-stake moments to help them out with their anxiety?
It's gonna sound strange, so just bear with me for a minute, but often it usually cracks up my clients. Like sometimes I tell them they need to go for a lunge. Like, and it might not actually be go for a run, but if they're feeling a lot of anxiety, so I ask, we get really clear on like, is it a feeling, a sensation in your body? Like, are you jittery? Are you feeling like you just need to move, or you're like pacing back and forth, right? That could be for your horse, for your human, or is it in your brain? Is your brain thinking a lot of things? Is it having a lot of what ifs? So once we figure out like which part it is, and one can influence the other, what's the thing you might need? So if you're jittery, if your horse were jittery, you'd probably put it on the lunge line and let it get some energy out, or you might take it for a walk. Or if it's a skittish horse and you're, thinking if it's like, ooh, what's over here? Ooh, what's over here? You might give them a calming pat. So I usually work kind of backwards into it through the horse. I'll say, what would your horse need? What's the human version of that? So like, is it talking nicely to yourself? Is it going over your course? Some people have learned that they go over their course a bajillion times, and that's a sign that they're anxious and it's actually not helping them anymore. Some people, they're like, no, it's comforting for me. So like that actually helps me. So I always say you need to go lunge yourself. I don't know. We'll figure out what that means, but you need to go for a lunge.
That's good. I'm going to ask Pete that question, and then I'm going to answer that question.
Okay.
What I would say, let's have some fun with this. Pete, what would you do?
I'd tell them I would go to block one, and let them figure out what they need to do. Do they need to walk it out? Do they need to stand and think about it and let their brain go through until they can move and get out of that system? And then if they need help, then I would say, go to a place. You need to come over here and stand in a safe spot and figure this out.
I love that. And I would, one step even before that, so maybe it's ground zero, is how do you even know what you need if you don't know what you're feeling? Most people are like, oh my God, I haven't even considered my body. I don't even know that I don't know what my body's doing. So that's their first assignment, is like, go out, have a week, go to the barn, tell me what you feel in your body on your drive to the barn. And that opens up a lot of things.
Okay, so I'm going to dive in this a little bit more. So you see this a lot in the professional world. You see the athletes listening to a headset and listening to music and all that other good stuff. And I even might tell them to sing a little bit while they're listening to music, or dance while they're doing it. If you're talking about you need a lunge, get that movement, kind of get going, relax the shoulders, get them kind of relaxing a little bit more like that. So
cool.
I'm just curious, Pete. I don't know, but if we were to have Brianna to pick a song for her before she would compete, what song would that be to get you in the zone?
You would think that I would know this because I do think about it a lot. I have playlists, and I have playlists based on the mood I think I need. So sometimes I want something to match me, right? And I want to be like kind of pumped up. Or sometimes if I'm maybe too pumped up, I need to like chill out a little bit. So I don't know that I have a song. Maybe I'll get back to you on that. But
maybe you got to share your playlist. Like Coach Carol Gwynn's going to share her playlist for her team. That stuff.
It would be pretty vulnerable of me because there's a whole lot of judgment out there. People are really, really judgmental of music.
I used to use a lot of music for teaching. In fact, I did a complete lesson without saying a word. I just went through my playlist on what she needed to do with her horse, and she had to figure out what the song was telling her.
Cool. Based on like rhythm, or based on the words, or both?
Both.
Cool.
So if she was going too fast, I would play a slower song that talked about being in the moment. and paying attention. And then I kept on changing it as she needed more.
That could be a fun thing.
Yeah.
You know, Brianna,
That sounds awesome.
that could be a fun thing for you to try too, you know, see how that works.
Okay, so parents are a big
Oh,
part
parents.
of junior riders and even some older riders sometimes. So how do you prepare the family? Because it's a lot of pressure.
It's so much pressure. It's so much pressure. And how do I prepare the parents?
Yeah, because you have some parents that are pushing them too hard, and you have some parents that don't care and really are discouraging them from doing what they really want.
Just understand the whole mental health of it all, I think, is what we want to know, because you got the like football parent, you know, rock, go, go, go. The other one's going to be calm. So you got to help them understand what that rider is, what they need. But go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of times it's that they're doing what comes out if I get the opportunity to work with the parents is also having them have awareness of what's happening for them. Are you getting nervous when your kid is riding? Like what do you need? Do you, and then talking, it's a little bit of a family session or, a parent session of like, let's talk to your rider and what do they need? 9 times out of 10, the kid will, but not a kid, teen will say something like, I really think they're trying to be helpful, but like, it's not, it's stressing me out. So then I'm like, cool. Okay. So you think they want to be helpful? Let's give them a job. What would be helpful? What can they do for you so that they are in fact doing something that helps them, which is probably an activity or right, helping you with something. And you are actually getting something you need. And so when they're starting to have that conversation is when I see the dynamics change and it become more of a supportive role, which is, like, hey, it's helpful if you're by the ring, but I need you to, get me water, not chime in on anything. And then for the parents too, to be like, what am I supposed to do? 9 times out of 10, they're like, I don't know what my place is. I know I'm not a trainer and the trainers told me to behave this way. Right. But also I love my kid and it's scary sometimes. So what do I do? So
or trying to tell them, why aren't you wrong diagonal and stuff like that, where it's too late. Like I always say, if I have to help you while you're showing, there's a problem.
Yeah. And then the other thing I see is sometimes they're hearing what the trainer is saying and they're reporting that to their kid too. And in those moments, I really feel like what I hear often is the rider to be like, I kind of just want my mom or my dad or my sibling, whatever. I just need them to be my family, which is like, I love you. You did a good job, or we'll try again tomorrow, or like, it's going to be okay. That it's so much simpler than I think we're making it out to be. And they're like, I don't need them to just tell me what the trainer has said. That's not actually making me feel seen and supported.
So trainers often carry their emotional weight of their clients.
Mm-hmm.
How can we protect their own mental wellness? Because sometimes you go to that first student in the morning and your day could be shot if you don't let it go. So what advice do you give for trainers on making sure you don't have the bad session that carries on to the rest of them?
2 things pop up immediately for me. One would be to have some kind of routine or ritual in between maybe clients that helps you shift from one to the next. Maybe it's a song, just one. Maybe it's a snack. Maybe it's just a mantra. Could be whatever. It's so that you're shifting, right? That one's over. I'm walking into the next one. This rider is about this. This horse is about this. So you're refocusing your mindset. The other piece is maybe a little deeper, and it would be about understanding where the line of responsibility is, what's mine, what's theirs. And I would say for trainers, it might be the same or different than what they have with their horses, right? Which part do you expect the horse to do and which part is your responsibility? Some trainers feel overly responsible or able to manufacture things with horses. And I think it blurs that line. Same with training, like if you've prepped your kid, you did the best you could that day, they're the one in the ring. Like they also have some agency in it. You're not completely responsible. So also being able to tolerate others' disappointment, tolerate others' frustration. Now, that doesn't mean allow bad behavior or name calling or how they do that. But like sometimes people are going to feel angry and sometimes people are going to be bummed. Like let them be bummed.
You got me thinking about a thing that I deal with a lot, which is the pressure from the outside. Well, why aren't you riding that horse? Why aren't you showing that horse? I could be doing this with it. I could be doing that with it. And I have actually a really good student of mine that has a very difficult horse, and she has two of her really close friends and employees that could ride that horse.
Mhm.
And I always say to her, you don't want to go there, because you prove them right by the horse bucking them off, now we're set back. And then, or if they ride it, well, they've been riding longer than you are. So maybe they could be able to be riding it, but it's your journey, not theirs. What
Right.
advice would you give to get the background out? Because I've lost a lot of students because somebody said, well, you could be doing way better by doing this. So what would advice to keep the noise from their peers away?
It's a good question. I think it comes down to trust, like trusting the people you have in your corner, right? So that doesn't mean don't question some things, right? Like, hey, why are we doing it this way? Might be one way to approach it versus that, or someone brought this up to me. What do you think about that? But it's about trusting. Do you have trust in your team? Do you have trust in your horse? Do you have trust in your trainer? Do you have trust in the vets and the farriers? And trust also is earned, I believe, over time. So to keep the noise out, I think it's like, do I feel good about this? Am I in the right? Is this good for me? Would I be thinking this if somebody else didn't say this?
We've been talking about this, and I'm thinking about with my own coaching in the past, I would always talk about pyramid. Parents have their roles as a support or whatever. They're not crossing over to being the coach or the trainer. Trainer has their responsibilities to help out that rider, but they're not the ones riding or parenting.
Right.
Okay. And it's the rider that's on the top of that pyramid that it's their responsibility to be able to achieve or whatever. So, it's them that's doing it, not the outside people right there, Brianna and Pete. That's how I do it. But, I want to talk about something that makes me kind of think about when I taught tennis, because I had about 8 women's tennis teams and how they would all interact. They would go play their matches, then they would have lunch afterwards, and they're talking to each other's afterwards before their husband or their kids come home, and then it's back at it again or whatever. So the old barn culture can be uplifting or toxic. What makes for a truly healthy barn community? Because I wonder if a lot of your business is just dealing with the barn community itself.
It is. It's dealing with relationships. Sometimes they're with two-legged relationships, sometimes they're with four-legged relationships, but it's all the same. Sometimes it's a fun way to do it, and it takes some of the threat out of it. For me, when I'm dealing with potential barn dynamics or human-to-human dynamics, is like, if you had a horse that was doing this, I try and make it into horse terms. Like if you had a horse that was nipping at you all the time, what would you do? Like, what would you say? Would you walk away? Would you tell that horse, like, knock it off? I don't like that. Like, and then they're kind of like, yeah, I probably wouldn't tolerate that. So we try and then find our way, like, what would you say to a human? What are the words? What are the behaviors you can do? But I think it was one of your podcasts that I was just listening to, and I was nodding my head at it, that said, one bad apple can spoil the bunch.
Yes,
and
well done. Yes.
Yeah, it was good. And I try not to use words like good, bad, but there are we've been talking about energy and vibes and dynamics. If someone's really focused on outcomes and blue ribbons and they're not at all focused on the process, that's going to change a dynamic. I mean, if everyone is focused that way, it's going to be a really competitive environment, but probably not all that supportive.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So I think about barns having values. Like if you're looking at a new barn or maybe it happened when you were teaching tennis, probably each group had their own, certainly had their own culture, right? And their own dynamics for sure. But ultimately it's about probably the club or your values that you're going to try and hone in on and motivate from there. So when I'm working with professionals, it's one of the questions I ask them, like, what are the values of your business? And if you're leading with those, you're going to attract clients that also want those values too. There's always going to be some outliers, of course.
There's always one.
They'll find their place though too.
So how do you use herd dynamics to translate into the human belonging and to teach?
It comes from education. Like we're very similar. So the horse's brain is very similar to a trauma brain, and then our brain, human brains have evolved over time. We have some things that probably helped us in some ways, but also harm us in some ways or limit us with our overthinking and our judgment and our assessments. Like the horses don't really have that, or at least not as sophisticated as we do. And so I try and bring it back to basics and make it a little simpler and talk about like the lone wolf or the lone horse really is more vulnerable and doesn't survive. Like they need their herd. They need to figure out how to work in the herd, and everyone's got a role in it. And so I do maybe some education, some talking about it. I don't know about your horses, but sometimes our horses aren't in group turnouts for a variety of reasons. So people aren't always that familiar with it, except for when I'm doing the therapy and we use horse dynamics all the time. It's like kind of one of the first things I do in terms of like, what do you observe about the herd? What's your story about what's happening and who likes who? And, make it all up, to project it all on there. And then it gets really fun and workable.
That sounds great. Brianna, I'm just kind of curious. Have you ever seen a moment where a horse revealed something about a client of yours before the client could say it to themselves?
Yes. I should say yes. And there are times I have hunches, and it's really about the meaning that the clients make about those interactions that are really important. So it doesn't matter what I think about that interaction. It's more important that they see that interaction. So, for example, client I've been seeing for a long time. We're out with the horses. Yes, this was actually yesterday. And we're exploring this space that she's named the future for her. And it has opportunity. It also has some things that I call obstacles. Like I would label them obstacles. She calls them adventure in there. And one of the horses in the herd, they're at liberty. So no halter, no harness, in a big space, gates are open, and they're just roaming around doing their thing. And one picks its head up, locks eyes with the client, and walks towards. I'm trying to use pretty neutral language so that she can fill in whatever, right? Walks straight towards her and lays down right next to us. And then almost as quickly as it did it, got up, looked her in the face, and then turned around and walked back to where it came from. Pretty unique experience, right? I've known these horses a long time. I've never known it to do that. But what was really cool was, instead of me saying like, oh my gosh, that was so magical, that's so unique, oh my God, that's amazing, because I don't know if it felt amazing to her, she was like, so I just asked her, what was that?
Yeah. And
she was like, there was a whole bunch of words that she said that were really going to be really memorable for her about that moment that she'll take with her for years.
And I think that's powerful when you allow the human to verbalize what they felt, saw, even if it's wrong sometimes. It's powerful because then you see their perspective on how they see the world.
Yeah.
A lot of times I show them and I'm like, horses don't think that way.
Right.
And it devastates them at first. And they get to the reality and then they're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't think that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Similar to when someone's riding, like if they're saying he's being, maybe you find this in your work, like he's being naughty or he's a bad horse. It's like, well, can we just unpack some of those words? Like, what is he, she? I have a chestnut mare. I'm allowed to say whatever. I know all the things about it. She's fantastic. And also, right, she has a stigma about her. But so if they're like, he's being whatever, what is he actually doing? What's the movement of his body? What's it look like? And that seems to break it down and then helps them also ride. You asked me that question about like how to go through setbacks. Like, if a rider has one, what actually happened in neutral language, not I made such a big mistake. It's like, I cut my turn. Okay, I can cut my turn. We can fix that next time. You just stay out longer.
No, that sounds great. As we got just a few more questions for you and have people learn more about yourself and your program there, you built a space where people feel seen and safe. What's the legacy you want Be Heard to leave in the equestrian community?
I want people to talk about the hard stuff. I want that to be okay. And I want them to be able to say, this doesn't feel right for me. Like, I'm not sure what it is, and it might feel right for you, but it's not a fit for me. And let that be okay.
If someone's listening today, remembers only one thing from you, what do you hope it is? So if you could give a message to one person or the whole world, what would it be?
Just one message to the whole world? Just one?
Well, okay, I'll give you mine. My one.
I have a lot of words. Haven't you seen that? Like,
No,
you want me to just pick
my
one?
one message is always wait. Wait before you get started. wait when you ask them to do something they've never done, wait for after you finish doing something you think they know, and then wait when you're done with your session. So what would be
good. Mine would be trust.
Good.
Trust it. It's one of the things that I say to myself, and I've had someone say to me, like right as I walk in the ring, and it's been the most helpful. And I'll take it outside of my own ride for that. It's like all the things I've told you, all the practice we've done, like trust, it's in there. Like trust you, trust your horse. When I'm getting wordy again, but when, there have been events in some people's lives, it makes it really hard to trust themselves. So, but there's always a part of them that knows, they're still in there. So I guess I would say trust it, trust the process.
I like it.
Trust your prep.
I like both those. You guys want to hear what mine would be?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't think that Pete would say yes, but I think he was going to say no. But okay. So I'm going to go for it. Breathe.
Yeah.
I think about that before I do anything. Breathe. Before I would bounce that ball, breathe. Before you get on that arena, breathe. I think that sets the tone. What do you guys think?
It sounds great.
Sounds great. And as you said it, I noticed myself take a big breath. So if you're saying it to yourself, or if you're coaching people and you just say it, our mirror neurons just make us do it anyway. So that's amazing. Yeah. So we have wait, trust, and breathe. I feel like this is a dynamic.
There we go. We're in the zone.
We're going to have to change those words up in the World Equestrian Center, what they have up there in each arena. Just have those three. Don't tell them that we're doing that, but that's what we're going to do. All right. Before we go, is there one book or podcast or show that's inspiring you right now?
Is there a show, book? I've been.
Don't say Dateline, because that's what my girlfriend watches all the time. Yelling nervous.
No, I don't do that. I don't know that I have one. It's been a minute since I've been able to digest a whole book in its entirety. So I think I've been taking snippets, but I think it would be, I just like to learn. I like to hear perspectives that aren't, even if they're not mine, I want to hear about it and be kind of curious, like, that might not work for me, but I wonder what about that works for someone else. So I don't have a specific recommendation, but it would be that I just like learning and I like hearing people's perspectives.
Well, then great. Can you share with everyone before we go how they could listen to you or find you, or, how they could work with you?
Absolutely. So I have a podcast with another equestrian therapist who's on the East Coast. We actually met through social media when I was getting into equestrian counseling. And I thought, surely other people are doing this, because I can't be the only one that has this idea that equestrians need some mental health support. And I wasn't. And so we just had a great couple conversations, and that's how we started the podcast. It's called Unbridled Therapist. And we talk about things as amateur riders and what we experience in the world as amateurs, and then themes that are happening in counseling, and then some skills about how to navigate them. So that's a great one. We have some fun conversations. We have some deeper conversations, free form like this. And then working individually, you can find me on my website, which is BeHeard, b-heard.com, or on Instagram, BeHeard Counseling.
Brianna, thank you so much. I thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today and the listeners. And to our listeners, remember, whether it's in the barn, the show ring, or life itself, don't just push through. Make sure you're being truly heard. So thank you, Brianna.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. What an honor to be here.
That's a wrap on another powerful episode of In the Zone with Ian Robb and Dancin Pete Rodda. Whether you ride, compete, or simply love your animals like family, today's episode was a reminder that true teamwork starts with connection and that health is the ultimate performance edge. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And catch us next time as we dive deeper into the mind, body, and bold journeys of top performers. Until then, stay focused, stay inspired, and keep riding in the zone.